Hey everybody, Michael Snyder, Pacific Northwest Weather Watch. Today is October 6th, and right now we are looking at the infrared slash visible satellite imagery as the sun comes up. It changes to the visible satellite here. You can see the low clouds in western Washington, Oregon along the coastline this morning. Cutoff low exists over Alaska. You can see the next batch of energy move towards western Alaska as we speak. Models are starting to trend a little bit further east with that trough as we go through the forecasts here. We'll check that out in the extended here coming up. Now taking a look a little bit closer, you can see those low clouds through the Willamette Valley up through the Puget Sound, some high clouds moving over to the top. You can see some of the smoke that exists in some of the valleys all the way up into the Cascades here as these fires continue to go, and they're probably going to continue to do so, at least smolder until we can get some precipitation out here. You can see some fog along the Washington, Oregon coastline here, a little bit of breakup going on here across the Washington coast, and mostly sunny skies elsewhere across eastern Washington, Oregon, BC, and through Idaho and Montana. A little bit of low cloud activity going on as we speak. Seattle again below average yesterday. Remember we were talking about last week, the ridge around, and we're going to have above average temperatures for this period here. Well, it didn't quite materialize, and that's kind of one of the pitfalls of forecasting ridges here in October across the Pacific Northwest. So looking at Portland yesterday, it did break out early enough to where it could get above average there, 72, average high 69 this time of year for Portland. Checking out things across the Willamette Valley, mainly Portland south. You can see the dense fog advisory does exist along the Oregon coast, southwest Washington, Willamette Valley. Air quality alert exists still for the Cedar Creek fire out there. And now looking at Missoula, Montana, just showing you guys the further you go east, the more likely you are to be impacted by this system. Mainly east of Spokane, really. There is still a precipitation chance for the Cascades, but it is dwindling a little bit in the most recent runs. You can see Missoula, Montana going from these warm temperatures down to fairly chilly temperatures as we go through early and mid next week. Taking a look here, this is the icon, the European, actually German model here, excuse me. You can see a cutoff low here over the Gulf of Alaska. And then you see the next system kind of swing down through the Gulf of Alaska here, impacting BC. See the trough swing off to the east across Idaho and Montana as we go. Then the potential ridge rebuilding here as we go through next week. Now we have to watch this ridge for the potential of fog as we saw the last few days here across the Pacific Northwest. But for the most part, there is pretty good confidence that a ridge will return in the wake of this trough that swings down, but mainly stays east of the Rockies here, it looks like anyway. Now we have European on the left, GFS on the right. This is Northern Hemisphere, Alaska, BC, Washington, Oregon. Check out that cutoff low over the Gulf of Alaska here. It's going to help amplify the ridge here for the next few days. There goes the next system across Alaska. You can see it on the European here, and on the GFS here to the right. And you can see that trough swing down. The GFS keeps it further east. The European showing it still clipping northeast Washington, Idaho, Montana there, but really not a big impact precipitation-wise. Any system that takes this kind of trajectory is moisture starved to start with, and this one really stays inland pretty well here, so we're not expecting much precipitation from this. You can see a portion of this energy break off and form this cutoff low over California here on the European and actually the GFS here. A little bit of disagreement there on through the extended, but you can see the ridge build back over the top of the Pacific Northwest as we go through next week. Then a bit of a polar lobe kind of readjust this ridge again. You can see it extend well up into Canada here. Then maybe off in the extended forecast, we'll get some Gulf of Alaska troughing returning here, but no promises there, and getting ahead of ourselves a little bit with that forecast. Now, taking a look at the atmosphere right now, this is SeaTac this morning. You can see the warm temperatures aloft. So when you look at a ridge in October, you got to be careful. Look at these light winds near the surface here, and this is what we call an inversion. The standard atmosphere drops in temperature as you go aloft, but as you can see in the lower levels between the surface and 5,000 feet, we are actually reducing the temperature, and that's what we call an inversion here. And you can see that moisture here is pretty close to the temperature, and that's what's causing the fog in the Puget Sound and the Willamette Valley. Now, taking a look here, this is Pivotal Weather. I was able to get the sounding off this website here. You can see the ridging over the area now. Looks like maybe a fairly warm pattern, but as you can see for Seattle, we were below average here for the last couple of days. So as we go through, you can see the system slide down through British Columbia here, out over Alberta, and mainly impact Montana east on the GFS. And this ridge builds back in here. You have to be careful, like we saw with forecasting these ridges here. You can't just say, oh, heat returns, or there's going to be a lot of warmth or whatever, going across the area. You got to check out other things here. You got to check out inversions, and you got to check out wind direction and what kind of moisture exists at the surface. So as you go through the extended forecast, you can see this ridge is pretty resilient here, at least on the most recent deterministic run on the GFS here, the 06Z. I believe the 12Z is actually running right now. If we can check that out. Actually, let's go ahead and look at it here real time. So as we go, here comes that system. And yeah, the GFS just kicks that thing even a little bit further east, it looks like, even on this run. Builds that ridge back over us here as we go through next week. This polar lobe readjusts that high a little bit, but really doesn't do much to it on the most recent GFS. Then in the very extended here, you can see about 10, 11 days out, something approaches there from the west, but we're getting ahead of ourselves there. But anyway, let's take a look at what we can expect possibly next week. This is next Thursday morning. You'll see the warm temperatures aloft with the ridging, but look at these light winds at the surface, and you can see the inversion does exist, although it's not showing as much surface moisture. So maybe we'll avoid this dense fog we've been getting here the last 3 days for the Puget Sound, for example. So just different things you have to look at when you're building a forecast, especially out a week in advance. Now, taking a look here, this is the column integrated cloud water here. You can see the low clouds that do exist across the Willamette Valley and the Puget Sound should burn off today. You can see it still really pretty socked in by tonight here across the Oregon coast, the Washington coast. Not much in the way of low clouds showing up, just a little bit, maybe through the Willamette Valley and the Puget Sound here Friday morning. Saturday morning, it looks like a little bit more low clouds return to the area here. So that'll depend, really makes a big difference on the high temperatures on just how much cloud cover you get during these morning hours. And as we go on in through Sunday morning here, you see a few low clouds return here by the end of the forecast here. But pretty good low cloud activity in the next few days, at least along the Washington, Oregon coast coming up, warmer into the interior, as you can see. Now, taking a look at 925 millibars, 2,500 feet, you can see the offshore flow kind of going on here. It is fairly light, but this is at 2,500 feet. That's why it's not stirring up the atmosphere at the surface much. But you see the easterly component going on here, so we're going to introduce this degraded air quality in any portion that's downstream, especially of these forest fires going on across the Cascades and the Cascades of Oregon here, and for British Columbia also. And as we go on in through Friday, Saturday, you can see this easterly component still exists all the way into Sunday morning here. So you get the picture there. Any smoke that exists over eastern portions can drift over the western portions here for the next several days. So taking a look here at the HRRR, this is the 3-kilometer high resolution model. This is this morning's run. If we let this go through this afternoon, you can see these fires kind of flare up here through the afternoon hours and still kicking some smoke off through the Puget Sound. As we go on into Friday afternoon, you can see that kind of impacting western Washington, southwest BC, and northern portions of Oregon there pretty well here as we go through Saturday morning. So man, we could really use a big rainmaker, and it doesn't look like we're going to get it in the next week here. Now, checking out ridge position here. This is our spaghetti plot again. Let's look at the new forecast. This is the 06Z run. Goes out about to the 11th of October, I believe. The ridge showing up strong here until about Sunday. Then you can see it gets repositioned here and kind of smashed by this trough as it swings by. The trough doesn't look like it's going to have a big impact here for us in the Pacific Northwest, other than kind of moving that ridge around and stirring things up a bit. Then the ridge wants to rebuild here as we go through next week. So we'll continue to watch that. But this trough not looking like as big of an impact as it was yesterday. Now, taking a look at this map here, it's probability of precipitation greater than 0.4 of an inch. You can see very low values here until we get to about Monday and Tuesday morning. You can see a bit of maybe 40-50% chance of some measurable rain here for the Cascades. Better chances you go up through eastern BC and along the coastline here. So north and east is better. You can see some of that precipitation potential move down through over Calgary, Missoula, Montana, the Rocky Mountains, for example. And then you can see our probability for precipitation drop again as we go through the extended forecast here. And not a great signal if you're looking for precip to put these fires out. As you can see, Alaska is stealing all the moisture again through the extended forecast. This is Crater Lake. Look at this. Remember yesterday, the drop in temperatures that happened? Let's go ahead and back up and show you that just 2 runs previous. Look at that. The cold air was supposed to clip us a lot better here, but now in the most recent forecast, we stay fairly warm all the way through next week. Seattle, Tacoma, if the low clouds don't hang out too much here for Seattle, you should warm up, maybe even up into the 70s here this weekend. We'll see how that goes. Vancouver, just a bit of a drop as that trough swings by to the north and east. Portland, same thing. But look at some of these temperatures that European is forecasting. I don't know if they're going to get that warm here. And then you can see the drop as the trough clips the region here, moving off to the east. But you can see we could have some pretty nice weather coming up this weekend. Seattle, Tacoma, this is the latest here on the European, kind of showing the control actually says close to a tenth of an inch, but the mean is much less, down around 2/300 of an inch possibly there. You can see all the dry runs that do exist in the ensemble members there. Now, Seattle, Tacoma, yesterday, this was showing more of a drop, more cold air getting into the region. Some seeps in at 5,000 feet, but again, not a dynamic system. This is not the precipitation event we've been looking for. GFS, just a tiny little bump there in the temperatures, maybe something off in the extended, but we have plenty of time to watch that at this point. Tillamook, similar to SeaTac here. Very light precipitation signal showing up. Stevens Pass up towards the Bolt Creek Fire here. Not much precipitation showing up in the ensemble runs. A few of them are fairly, have some measurable precipitation and meaningful precipitation, but for the most part, not a good signal here. The further you go east, the more you're going to see the dip and the cold air impact the region here. This is for Helena, Montana here, and you can kind of see that as you go off east, that cold air is definitely going to impact Montana more than it will the further you go west. Now, I showed this yesterday. I just want to show it another time here for anybody who might have missed it. This is sea surface temperature anomaly. Here's the equator. Here is Hawaii, Washington, Oregon. And what we're interested for La Nina is 5 north or 5 south of the equator. And you can clearly see this cold water here. Classic La Nina signature exists. As we go into November, you'll notice that wane a little bit there. December a little bit more, but still La Nina is in charge through December here. Even January, it's still your borderline La Nina also, but you can see the trend here, kind of bringing that sea surface temperature anomaly back down, and by April, potentially even bringing it back up above zero here. Clearly in neutral territory by then, but again, we're pretty far out here, and La Nina still clearly in charge across the equatorial Pacific Ocean. This is looking at precipitation anomaly. You can see this is for October here. By the way, this is the European seasonal model. Just ran, it came out yesterday. It started running on the 1st of October. But you can see the signal there for a dry October. But as you get towards November, look at this. Maybe even a little bit of above average signal here for the Pacific Northwest. December, similar, but waning a little. January, look at that signal for the Cascades here, and above average preset for much of the Pacific Northwest. February, March, not much of a signal there as expected. But now taking a look here, this is mean sea level pressure anomaly. This is for October, showing that cutoff low here, kind of over the Gulf of Alaska, continuing some ridging over the Pacific Northwest. But look, by November, we get some troughing showing up. December, once the high pressure shows up like this, you can start to get some cooler air getting into the Pacific Northwest. So lowland snow lovers, fingers crossed, or just for the mountainous areas. But look, by January, a pretty interesting signal here as this high pressure sets up. This would be driving kind of a cool northwesterly flow, and that troughing across the Pacific Northwest could mean a bout of lowland snow during January for some areas. We'll continue to watch that. This is purely really entertainment at this point. As I said yesterday, it's just something to look at for now. February, that big high still exists out here. Across the northern Pacific Ocean as well. And as we go on into March and April, not much of a signal there. And so right now, look at this. This was brought out today. Look at, they've introduced moderate drought for the Puget Sound, the west slopes of the Cascades here and on into southwest Washington, clipping northern Oregon there. So kind of interesting. But I mean, as soon as the storm train starts up here, it will quickly forget about this moderate drought, and that'll be wiped out here. Now, taking a look at the 6 to 10 day temperature outlook, I don't disagree with this one too much. So this is above average. There's, we're probably going to be a little bit above average at times here coming up in the next 6 to 10 day temperature outlook here. The precipitation signal, fully agree with that. We are looking like below average precipitation is coming across the region. You can see Alaska stealing all of our rain here. Share of the wealth, Alaska. You can see 8 to 14 day temperature outlook. I don't know. I could have gone with maybe not such a strong signal here. We don't know if we're going to be foggy, or by the time you get this far out, things can change quite a bit. But whatever. It's not enough that I disagree with it too much there. But the 8 to 14-day precipitation outlook, I agree with this as well. It does not look like we have meaningful rain coming up here. But again, it's only October 6th, and we have, this is 2 weeks out. Things can change quickly across Pacific Northwest. So again, yeah, let's see how fast these low clouds burn off. They should burn off a little bit quicker the next few days, and Portland and Seattle should be warmer here over the weekend coming up. And we'll watch the models to see if there's any kind of trend back to the west with this trough. Once it corrects and starts to move back to the east, though, it usually doesn't come back west. So we're not looking at much precipitation, at least meaningful, across Pacific Northwest here from this system. It's just going to kind of readjust the ridge, push it offshore, and then a ridge is probably going to build back in the wake of that. And we'll check out that ridge through the extended forecast. We'll keep checking that extended too to see if there is any precipitation signal showing up through the extended. But anyways, hope you guys are having a good day. We'll continue to do this. I'm still working on the windstorm project here. It's going to come out probably in the next month or so, probably in the next few weeks. I was working on it quite a bit yesterday. So anyway, just giving you guys that update, and I hope you guys are having a good day, and I'll talk to you guys tomorrow.